Well, hello everybody, and welcome. We get a little bit of a light-hearted, at least here for the first slide, and talking about leisure time and then yellow journalism first. As you guys know, leisure time is really just time that is spent, in other activities other than subsistence. And as you know, subsistence is a term that means what you need to survive. So obviously, if it was in the state of nature, your subsistence would need food, clothing, shelter, and then any time you spent not in pursuit of food, clothing, and shelter, the things that are mandatory to live would be considered leisure time. And of course, as society has developed, leisure time is spent, very, very differently. Certainly now, even than when I was a kid, and even way back, in the late early 1900s. Some things are still the same. Some popular activities at this time included things like baseball, which, yeah, I mean. I guess it's still pretty popular, not nearly as popular as it was. Tennis actually used to be very popular in the United States. I hear it's pretty popular still in Europe, but not so much anymore in the United States. Boxing, I think we know that that's kind of been replaced by MMA now, but boxing used to be huge, and people would listen to it on the radio all the time. And of course, football. And as you might know, um, it was college football that was the big attraction. Also, show business, which is still popular, with Hamilton, of course, and the stage acts, and movies were in very, very beginning. And I know it might sound strange, but reading books, magazines, and newspapers, and of course we still do that. Obviously, it's just slightly different form now. But these were some of the more popular things that people would do for leisure time. I guess horse racing was also something that we might want to include there as well. Now, in terms of reading, there were some magazines and newspapers that were involved in what we call yellow journalism. And yellow journalism is a type of journalism that exaggerates and sensationalizes news events in order to attract more readers and, of course, sell more papers. And so, with yellow journalism, it wasn't really necessarily to inform the public. It was really to entertain the public. And the truth, I'm sure there had to be some kernel of truth involved in the story, but of course it was sensationalized and exaggerated. And the idea is, hey, who's going to want to read about, you know, today it was 75 degrees and sunny, or there was a terrible explosion and everything was destroyed and fire was burning it just depends on what you can do to attract the readers. And yellow journalism would produce these stories that were sensational and were supposed to attract the reader. And so, while articles were often at least based on the truth, liberties were taken in order to make the product more attractive to a wide range of people. And later, believe it or not, yellow journalism, some people actually, I don't say take it seriously, but some people will at least listen to some of the stories, and it actually does contribute to the frenzy of public opinion on some important issues like the Spanish American War. The other example, which is really more an extreme example of yellow journalism, and these are pretty funny to look at. You look at the Inquirer, um, and we see some of their stories. Snow White works for OSI. Bigfoot found. These are the things that you see. Half man, half dog baffles doctors. My wife loves the way I look. Says 38-year-old newlywed. Not really. I guess this guy was 38 years old. I don't know. At any rate, there's really some bizarre stories there. All right. Um, Shifting to a more serious topic, one of the things that we have seen that tends to be true is that the powerful tend to stay in power. Now, of course, that's not all the time. There often are and can be changes. Um, but one of the things that contributed to the people in power staying in power was something called the spoils system. And the story behind the spoil system is that in the years before the federal government began to be massively expanded, so we're talking pre-Civil War, lucrative government jobs were given to friends and supporters of the victorious candidate. And we get the sort of old saying, to the victor goes the spoils of war, meaning the benefits of war. And lucrative is a wonderful vocab word, which means you make money. It's money. Um, Now, the problem with this is that oftentimes this led to incompetent people being responsible for important government agencies. If your only qualification is that you are, friends with a powerful politician, and you're in charge of some, important agency like, let's say, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and your only prior experience was, running some sort of, entertainment show or something like that, and now you're all of a sudden you're put in charge of a multi-billion-dollar agency, whose task it is to help people after a devastation like a hurricane. And if you're put in charge of that and you don't do a good job, people die, people get hurt. It seriously affects what happens to society, and unfortunately, that's exactly what happened in Hurricane Katrina. If you have time, look up Mike Brown, appointed as FEMA manager because he was friends with George Bush, the younger Bush, of course. And unfortunately, he completely, completely blew the response to Katrina because he wasn't prepared. He wasn't qualified, and people died. We thought we were over that, but not completely, I guess. So the idea of putting someone in a position that they're not qualified for, not only is just bad government, but it can be very, very dangerous. And so people start to come up with the idea that one ought to earn their position. And that's when the Pendleton Civil Service Act was passed. And this required people to demonstrate, and it was usually merit-based, taking a test of some sort like that, demonstrate that they were competent enough to hold office. And this was passed, of course, to address the spoils system. It wasn't 100% perfect, but it certainly at least put a minimum level of competency in place for people that were going to work in the government. Monetary policy. This can get a little complicated, but that's okay. The video does a pretty good job of explaining what this is. So, when people ask you the question, how much is money worth? You say, well, gee, that's a weird question. I mean, a dollar's worth a dollar. Well, yes and no. It depends what is backing that money. You say, well, okay, a dollar's worth a dollar. Then let's say, what is a Russian ruble worth? Well, it's worth a ruble. Well, how do you compare them? Is $1 equal to a ruble? And the answer is no. And it's because what is behind, what backs the money. Now we have since changed that in the 30s and 40s to a very, 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 very complicated system called fiat currency. But we're not going to talk about that today. So at the time, we had what was called the gold standard, which was all money printed in the United States must be backed by an equal amount of gold. If you find more gold, you can print more money. You don't find more gold, you cannot print more money. Now, of course, this limits the supply of money due to the scarcity of gold. With less money available, because they haven't found more gold, less money available, the money supply in the system, the value of the dollar increases. So it's really a law of supply and demand. If there's less money in the system, that money is worth more. Now, this favors big business and banking interests. Another group, populists in particular, said we should really adopt the bimetallic standard. And that is all money printed in the US has to have an equal amount of gold or silver, hence the bimetal. And because obviously there's more gold and silver than just gold, the amount of money available increases. And because there's more money in the system, the money is worth less, but there's more of it to go around. And this favors small business, farmers, and the average worker. In the end, we did not adopt the bimetallic standard, and it was an effort that did not finally make it, and we have since changed to what is called fiat currency, which I think there's a pretty good video to explain how that works. All right, thanks for watching.